The government just tried to punish someone twice for pulling a trigger once. And the Supreme Court said absolutely not. All 9 justices shut it down in a case you've probably never heard of. But if you own a gun, this ruling protects you in ways you need to understand right now. What happened on January 14th could be the difference between one conviction and multiple life sentences. This affects every gun owner in America, and here's why. Gun laws are changing every single week, and missing one could land you in serious trouble. Smash that subscribe button right now because I'm breaking down every major ruling the moment it drops. What I'm about to show you could save you from prosecutorial overreach you didn't even know existed. Hit subscribe, then stick with me for the next 10 minutes. Here's what went down. A man named Dwayne Barrett committed armed robberies. During one robbery, he fired his weapon, and someone died. Tragic situation all around. But here's where the story takes a constitutional turn. Federal prosecutors charged Barrett with using a firearm during a violent crime under one section of federal law. Then they charged him again under a different section for causing death with that same firearm during that same crime. Same gun, same trigger pull, same moment in time. 2 separate convictions, 2 separate punishments. The court system below said this was perfectly legal. Barrett said, wait a minute, that's double jeopardy. He appealed all the way to the highest court in the land. On January 14th, 2026, the Supreme Court issued its decision. 9 justices, 0 dissents, unanimous agreement that what prosecutors did violated the Constitution. Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson wrote the opinion, and every other justice signed on without hesitation. When you see a 9-0 ruling in today's divided court, you know something major just happened. This wasn't a close call. This was the court telling prosecutors they crossed a clear constitutional line. Let me break down what double jeopardy actually means in plain English. The Fifth Amendment to the Constitution says the government can't put you in jeopardy twice for the same offense. Jeopardy means being on trial, facing punishment, risking your freedom. Once the government takes its shot at convicting you, they don't get another chance for the same crime. It's a fundamental protection that goes back hundreds of years. The idea is simple. The government has massive resources and power. If they could keep trying you over and over until they got the result they wanted, that would be tyranny. So the Constitution says, no, 1 shot per offense. But here's where it gets complicated. What counts as the same offense? The Supreme Court has used a test from a 1932 case called Blockburger. The test asks whether each crime requires proof of a fact the other doesn't. If crime 1 needs you to prove A, B, and C, and crime 2 also needs A, B, and C, they're the same offense. If crime 2 needs A, B, C, and D, then it's different. You can be convicted of both because there's an additional element to prove. In Barrett's case, both charges stemmed from the exact same conduct. Section 924C of federal law makes it illegal to use a gun during a violent federal crime. Section 924J makes it illegal to cause death during that gun use. Prosecutors got convictions under both sections. They argued these are separate crimes with separate punishments. The lower courts agreed. But the Supreme Court said, hold on, let's look at what each crime actually requires as proof. Here's what the court found. Both charges require the exact same elements. Both need proof that Barrett used a gun during a violent federal crime. The death isn't a separate element that makes it a different crime. It's just a result that triggers a harsher penalty under Section J. Think of it like this. It's the same crime with an enhanced penalty, not 2 different crimes. Since both convictions require identical proof, they're the same offense under the Blockburger test. Convicting Barrett twice violated the double jeopardy clause. One of those convictions has to go. Now, most people don't realize how widespread this practice has been. Federal prosecutors have been stacking gun charges for decades. They look at one criminal incident and find multiple statutes that could apply. Then they charge under all of them, rack up multiple convictions, and add years or decades to sentences. It's an incredibly powerful prosecutorial tool. 1 gun crime becomes 3 convictions. 1 action becomes a lifetime behind bars. The Barrett decision just put major limits on that practice. Before we go deeper, are you subscribed? Because what's coming next could protect you from tactics you never knew prosecutors used. Click that subscribe button right now. These rulings come out fast, and you need to stay current. Do it now while you're thinking about it. Here's why this matters to everyday gun owners who never break the law. Federal gun laws overlap like crazy. There are statutes about possession, about receiving firearms, about transporting them, about lying on forms, about using them in crimes. A creative prosecutor can take one incident and find half a dozen federal statutes that technically apply. Before Barrett, they could potentially charge you under all of them and get separate convictions for each. After Barrett, they have to prove each charge requires different elements. If they all require the same basic facts, that's 1 offense, not 6. Let me give you a real-world example. Say you're a prohibited person under federal law because of an old conviction. You get caught with a gun. That's illegal possession under Section 922G. But receiving that gun was also illegal, and if you drove across state lines with it, that's illegal transportation. Should prosecutors be able to charge all three and get three separate convictions? Before Barrett, maybe? After Barrett, courts would have to look closely at whether each charge requires different proof. If they all just require showing you're prohibited and you had control of the gun, that's probably one offense, not three. Here's another scenario. You lie on a background check form. You check the wrong box or forget about something in your past. That's a federal crime under Section 922A. But then you take possession of the gun you bought. If you're actually a prohibited person, that possession is also a federal crime under Section 922G. Can they charge both? The court would have to analyze what each charge requires. If both just need proof you're prohibited and you possess the gun, they might be the same offense under Barrett. This is the part that shocked me when I really dug into this case. The implications go way beyond violent crimes. Anytime federal prosecutors try to stack multiple gun charges from one course of conduct, defense attorneys can now cite Barrett. They can argue the charges are really the same offense with the same elements. That forces prosecutors to be more careful and more fair in how they charge cases. It takes away some of their leverage and gives defendants better protection. Now, this is where it gets wild. Justice Neil Gorsuch wrote his own opinion even though he agreed with the result. He wanted to highlight problems in double jeopardy law that go even deeper. Gorsuch pointed out that courts routinely let prosecutors charge someone with multiple crimes in one trial, like murder and manslaughter. As long as they only convict on one, courts say it's fine. But Gorsuch asks a hard question. If the Fifth Amendment says you can't be twice put in jeopardy for the same offense, doesn't that apply even within a single trial? The Constitution says twice. Doesn't that mean you can't face the same charge twice in any form, even if it's all happening in one courtroom at one time? This is constitutional law at its deepest level. Gorsuch is suggesting the court's double jeopardy rules might need a major overhaul. He's saying maybe we've been too lenient with prosecutors for too long. Maybe the Constitution requires stricter limits on when the government can charge multiple crimes from the same conduct. This could reshape criminal law in ways we can't fully predict yet. But it shows you how seriously at least some justices take these constitutional protections. Here's what nobody's telling you about this ruling. It's part of a bigger pattern this Supreme Court term. The justices have been unanimous in multiple criminal law cases. When you get all 9 justices to agree from the most liberal to the most conservative, that tells you something important. It means the government's position was so extreme that everyone on the court rejected it. Barrett is exactly that kind of case. The government argued they could take one gun crime and split it into 2 convictions with 2 punishments. Every single justice said that's obviously unconstitutional. Wild fact, about 75% of people watching this video aren't subscribed to this channel. Don't be one of them. Hit that subscribe button so you never miss critical legal updates that protect your rights. Do it now. Let's talk about the practical impact on federal gun prosecutions going forward. Prosecutors can't just throw every possible charge at a defendant anymore. They have to analyze each charge carefully. Does this charge require proof of something different from the other charges? If not, they're the same offense, and you can only get one conviction. This changes how prosecutors evaluate cases from day one. It changes what charges they bring, and it changes their leverage in plea negotiations. Speaking of plea deals, this is huge for that process. Most federal cases never go to trial. They end in plea agreements. Prosecutors use the threat of multiple charges to pressure defendants into pleading guilty. They say, take this deal for 2 charges or risk trial where we'll hit you with 8 charges and you'll die in prison. That leverage just got weaker. Defense attorneys can now point to Barrett and say, half those charges are the same offense. If you can't get multiple convictions at trial, your bargaining position isn't as strong. This could lead to fairer outcomes across the board. Here's a hypothetical example to make this concrete. Imagine you're at a shooting range with a buddy. You let him fire your gun. Turns out he has an old felony conviction you didn't know about. Now you've potentially transferred a firearm to a prohibited person, which is a federal crime. But you might also have aided and abetted possession by a prohibited person, which is another federal crime. Can prosecutors charge both? Under Barrett, they'd need to show each charge requires different elements. If both just require proving you gave the gun to a prohibited person, that's one offense. They pick one, not both. Here's the biggest mistake people make about cases like this. They think, well, I'm law-abiding, so this doesn't affect me. Wrong. Constitutional protections matter for everyone. These rules determine how much power the government has over all of us. When the Supreme Court limits prosecutorial overreach, that makes the system fairer for everyone. You might never commit a crime. But if you did, or if someone you love did, these protections would be the difference between a fair process and government tyranny. Now let me tell you something that really stood out to me in this decision. The court didn't just say Congress didn't clearly authorize double convictions. They said, even if Congress wanted to authorize it, there's a serious constitutional question whether they could. That's massive. That means even if lawmakers passed a new statute tomorrow explicitly saying prosecutors can stack these charges, the Supreme Court might strike it down as unconstitutional. The double jeopardy clause isn't about what Congress intended. It's about what the Constitution allows. And some things are simply off limits no matter what Congress says. If you're enjoying this breakdown, my next video covers the Ninth Circuit case that just struck down California's open carry ban. That ruling affects millions of gun owners. Subscribe so it hits your feed the second it drops. You don't want to miss that one. Hit subscribe now. Let's talk about what happens to Dwayne Barrett specifically. The Supreme Court reversed the Second Circuit and sent his case back to the lower courts. One of his 2 convictions has to be thrown out. He'll still face serious prison time for the remaining conviction, but he won't be punished twice for one trigger pull. That's the Constitution working exactly as it should. The government doesn't get to double punish you just because they can find 2 statutes that technically fit your conduct. The broader impact affects thousands of federal gun cases every year. Every prosecutor handling a gun case now has to think about Barrett. Every defense attorney can cite it. Every judge has to apply it. This decision ripples through the entire federal criminal justice system. It strengthens constitutional protections. It limits government power. And it makes the system more fair for everyone involved. Here's what you need to remember from this ruling. First, the Supreme Court unanimously rejected double convictions for gun crimes with the same elements. 9-0, no debate. Second, this limits how prosecutors can stack charges in federal cases going forward. Third, it protects everyone from government overreach, not just criminals. And fourth, it shows the court is serious about enforcing constitutional limits even in gun cases. These are all major wins for the rule of law and individual rights. But here's a warning. Not every prosecutor has gotten the message yet. Some will keep trying to stack charges until judges shut them down case by case. If you ever face federal charges, you need a lawyer who knows Barrett inside and out. You need someone who will aggressively raise double jeopardy defenses. Don't assume the government will follow the Supreme Court's guidance on their own. You have to fight for your rights and assert them at every stage. The takeaway here is about more than just one case. It's about the Constitution and whether it still means something. The double jeopardy clause is in the Bill of Rights for a reason. It prevents the government from punishing you over and over for the same offense. It limits government power and protects individual liberty. When prosecutors try to get around it through creative charging, the Supreme Court will step in. That's what happened in Barrett. That should give every American confidence that constitutional protections still have teeth. Here's my bottom line. Barrett versus United States is a massive victory for constitutional rights. It's a unanimous rejection of prosecutorial overreach in federal gun cases. Every gun owner should know this case because it changes how federal charges work nationwide. The Supreme Court drew a bright line and told prosecutors they can't cross it. You don't get to punish someone twice for one act. You don't get to split one crime into multiple convictions to inflate sentences. The Constitution forbids it, and now that protection is stronger than ever. I spend hours researching and breaking down these complex legal decisions so you can understand them in minutes. Support this work by hitting that subscribe button. It takes 2 seconds, and it helps this channel keep going. Do it right now. Here's your action step. Share this video with other gun owners in your life. Make sure people understand what Barrett means for their rights. If you know anyone facing federal charges, tell their lawyer about this case, and stay informed as new rulings come out. The Supreme Court is reshaping gun law right now. Lower courts are issuing major decisions every month. You can't afford to miss these updates if you care about your Second Amendment rights. The Constitution only works when people know their rights and stand up for them. Barrett took his case all the way to the Supreme Court. It probably took years, but in the end, the court enforced his constitutional rights. They said no to double punishment. They protected the double jeopardy clause, and they did it unanimously. That should inspire all of us to defend our rights when government oversteps. Don't let this information just sit there. Use it, share it, remember it. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now. My next video drops in 48 hours covering another bombshell gun rights case. You won't want to miss it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.